Welcome to the 60-second reading of my memoir, The Innocence of Guilt. Wedding plans and a new job. I wrote to Brian that I had the blues. Not an uncommon thing for me, but complicated by the loss of Darryl and the fact that Brian was in Scotland on a field trip for a few weeks. So unconnected to everything around me, I decided to go all the way home to Colchester on my half day off, a 2-hour journey, for somebody to talk to. I knocked on the front door of 64 Wickham Road. Mum opened it, but didn't recognize me. She stared at me coldly and said, "What do you want?" "Hello, Mum, it's me," I said. And she took a closer look and saw her only daughter standing there in front of her. Rather unsettling to land up on my own front doorstep and not be instantly recognized, but I did have the habit of reinventing myself every few months in more ways than one. I hadn't been home in quite a while and sported a new coat and a new hairstyle. I decided to go home twice a week until Brian came back. It took 4 hours travel time out of each day, so I'd only have 4 or 5 hours at home with each visit, but it was better than staying in London by myself. Drawing a little closer to Mum during the hours spent in her company, in April I told her how Mrs. Parker treated me like a maid, working me so hard. Mum was so concerned about my health, she advised me to get a job in a hotel. She said rather huffily, "If you're being treated like a maid, you may as well be one." I didn't want to leave the Parkers, though, because I earned a high wage and put it aside for the cost of our wedding, although I ought to have considered my health instead of money because my situation worsened. An expensive nerve tonic called Sanatogen did nothing for my state. Neither did the children's chewable vitamins I stole from the nursery cupboard. Dr. Scholl wooden sandals helped my aching feet a little, but by the end of a day I was exhausted. My mind games played a huge part in why I stressed out all the time. But as usual, I dealt with those in the same old secretive way. They drained me seriously, as battling the repetitive rituals that resulted in terrible headaches, plus handling the challenge of caring for 4 demanding children all on my own, took its toll. Sensitive lumps broke out on my scalp, and I thought my head would explode from the pressure. My weight dropped too, and Mrs. Parker arranged for her private doctor to come in and take a look at me. I described the headaches, but he couldn't find any particular reason for them. He said after I married, I would no doubt put the weight back on, so not to be concerned. This prognosis seemed to satisfy Mrs. Parker, and I wasn't given any tests or medication. The real reason for my condition stayed hidden, as always. Brian and I often thought of eloping instead of the wedding planned for November in Colchester. We still stuck to our no sex before marriage vow, but found this more and more difficult to hold to. Imagining what Brian's parents would say, however, if we ran off in secret to Gretna Green in Scotland for a hasty wedding, made us think again. We remembered the engagement scenario. No choice but to wait and do things the proper way. Waiting was what I'd been doing my entire life, it seemed. In May, Brian's graduation ceremony took place at the Royal Albert Hall. Seating was limited to family only, so I sat outside until everybody came out to take photos. Brian could now write all these letters after his name: BSc, MSc, DIC. He said only people who were proud would do that. He asked me afterwards if I minded him going for his doctorate, which could take another 2 or more years. He knew he would get a much higher paid job with a PhD, so I made no protest. He was at his happiest when doing university work. I never wanted to deny him that joy. I couldn't have handled the guilt if I thought I had prevented him from his desires. By June, I'd had enough of my nanny job. The daily cleaning staff quit one after another, and each time somebody new came, I'd have to take them all around the flat and initiate them into the cleaning routine while Mrs. Parker went out on one of her endless shopping trips. Half the time, the people she took on didn't have enough command of the English language to comprehend my explanations. If they failed to clean properly, I had to do it on top of my regular work. More frustration. Socially, I became more and more an outcast, with Brian so often away. Jean held a nanny position in a different area of London, but we didn't see each other too often. I talked to Cheryl on the phone. She had also left Bernardo's, but didn't see her at all. I decided to take Mum's advice and tell Mrs. Parker I wanted to leave her employment. I didn't have anywhere to go, but I didn't care. I knew I'd find something. Not a maid in a hotel, though. Mrs. Parker shocked me by falling down on her knees right in front of me, sobbing that she didn't know what she would do without me and that I couldn't leave. I'd not seen a grown woman, other than myself, cry before. It made me realize her weaknesses. I told her I would stay on, but wanted to leave at the end of October in preparation for my wedding. She seemed happy for me and promised me a big wedding present. Brian took me shopping for my wedding ring. I chose a faceted band with designs of what appeared to be little trees on each facet, unusual. I asked the jeweller how long the designs would last before wearing off, and he reckoned 8 years. 8 years, a long time. I thought back on the struggles of the past 8 years. Would I make it to age 31? I could barely conceive the reality of all those years of marriage, all those years of happiness and security. With Brian by my side, I thought it might be possible. Such a lot to do in those last few weeks before the wedding. We organized everything via letters and phone calls. Brian found a flat for us in Finsbury Park, near his first digs, an area he found familiar, and moved in to secure it for us. I searched for a new job and went for an interview before a panel of directors responsible for the running of a handicapped children's centre. The ring on my left hand prompted a question, and I told them of my upcoming wedding. Then they asked if I planned to become pregnant within the next year, their sneaky way of asking me if I already was. Such were the biased attitudes towards working mothers then. Despite their probing on a personal level, they seemed impressed by my experience and supposed qualifications and gave me the nursing job. I'd answered their questions with enthusiasm, and it had been their responsibility to check my non-existent nursery nurse certificate. The day arrived for me to leave. Mr. and Mrs. Parker stayed home as I packed up everything, but they purposefully locked themselves in their bedroom with their youngest child so they didn't have to talk to me. The promised wedding present never materialized. I called a taxi and made several trips up and down the steps, hauling my case, several boxes of possessions, my record player and guitar out onto the front pavement. Went back inside, shut the door of the flat for the final time, and sat on the bottom step to await my ride to Finsbury Park. The taxi came and drove me off to my new life. I lived in the furnished flat with Brian for 2 weeks before our wedding. Letters came addressed individually to us, left on the hallway stand by the front door. Mrs. Baines, the lady who rented the first 2 floors with her husband, noticed by the envelopes we weren't Mr. and Mrs., and she approached Brian with her concern over our sinful state. Once he told her of our upcoming wedding, she didn't mention it again. It obviously still bothered her, though, as every time she saw one of us going out the front door, she grimaced and scurried into her flat. We laughed and wondered if she would believe us if we told her we weren't cohabiting in the true sense of the word. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to subscribe, like, or comment on this reading, and hopefully you will tune in to the next one. Bye for now.